Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight you're not in a palace or a battlefield. You're in Victorian London, a place of coal-smudged dawns, narrow rooms, and factories that breathe out more smoke than hope. You're not a wealthy merchant or a lady of society, just a match factory girl, drifting through a city that barely knows you're alive. Before we start, do me one small favour. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. If you prefer these stories without ads, you can join the Patreon. It's linked in the description. And if you want the ultimate immersive experience, consider using a pair of wireless earbuds. They're comfortable, discreet, and designed so you can wear them even while sleeping. I've linked my favourite pair, plus other sleep tools, in the description. Now, lie back, get comfortable. Let's begin. You wake before the sun has decided whether it wishes to rise. The light is not absent but hesitant, as though London itself is unsure if another day is required. You sit up slowly, because everything in your routine has learned to conserve energy. The room around you does not bother to greet you. It simply exists, narrow and pale, with walls that have absorbed more damp than warmth. A thin sheet slides from your shoulders, and the cold feels procedural. Like a formality, the building insists on observing. You dress without thought. Each article of clothing has already memorized its position on your body, and you move as if following a quiet instruction manual. Stockings, boots, the dress that has faded into the same colour as the fog outside. You tie your apron, though it will do little to stop what waits for you at the factory. The fabric is stiff near the seams, hardened from the residue of days you no longer count. You open the door and step into the hall, where all sound feels padded. Other tenants stir behind closed doors, their movements faint, like notes written in the margins of a ledger. No one speaks at this hour, and no one needs to. Silence is the most reliable companion for people whose days are measured by endurance rather than activity. When you step onto the street, London presents itself exactly as expected. Unembellished, unbothered, and coated in a haze that blurs everything just enough that you must accept it rather than inspect it. The fog hangs low, thicker than mist, but thinner than certainty, carrying the smell of coal smoke and distant chimneys. It does not lift, it only shifts, sliding from one street to another like an overworked clerk moving paper across a desk. You walk with a practiced rhythm, neither slow nor hurried. The city's cobblestones are slick beneath your boots, lightly dusted with soot. Every surface around you seems to hold a faint residue, as if London is constantly exhaling its own fatigue. You step through it without hesitation. The path you take is simple, carved more by repetition than by decision. Each turn has memorized you, and you no longer question the route. It guides you the way a rail directs a cart, inevitably. The street lamps, still lit from the night, glow faintly inside the fog. Their halos look blurred, softened, almost weary. A carriage rolls past in the distance, its wheels creating a muffled clatter that dissolves before it reaches you. Somewhere a vendor coughs, the sound wet and mechanical, carrying the same dispassionate tone as the factories rising like iron skeletons across the city. You continue walking. The sky overhead transitions from dark grey to a lighter shade of the same, as though trying to create the illusion of morning without achieving it. A thin drizzle begins, not rain, but a persistent moisture that settles into your clothes and hair with bureaucratic precision. It does not fall with emotion, it merely performs its function. As you cross an intersection, you notice the faint hum of distant machinery drifting through the air. It is too far to be meaningful, but near enough that it is always present. The sound acts like a preface for the day ahead, introducing you to the monotony long before you arrive. You pass a row of narrow houses with windows that seem to observe you without interest. Curtains remain drawn, shielding their occupants from the hour you have willingly entered. London has many eyes, but none look directly at you. The anonymity is not unkind, it is simply procedural. People like you are acknowledged by function, not identity. You move toward the river road, where the fog thickens, gathering itself into a denser, colder sheet. The Thames nearby adds its own scent, metallic, stale, slightly sweet, in a way that does not suggest freshness. You breathe it in out of necessity, not curiosity. The air, heavy with industrial residue, sinks deeper into your lungs, with each step as though marking its presence within you. A figure passes you, another girl perhaps, her shoulders hunched against the chill. She does not look at you, and you do not look at her. Your two lives run parallel for a moment, equally quiet, equally resigned. Then she turns down a side street and becomes a vague outline in the fog. Her absence is immediate and complete, like a page removed cleanly from a book. You continue straight. The outline of the factory begins to emerge, a darker shape within the grey. It rises without elegance, stretching upward like a structure concerned only with efficiency. No ornament, no decoration, not even neglect, only purpose. A few windows glow with early lamplight, the illumination soft but revealing the silhouettes of machinery waiting to be awakened. The closer you get, the more the air shifts. It gains a sharp undertone, a chemical whisper that reaches your senses before your eyes have fully recognized the building. You have grown accustomed to it, the way a person grows accustomed to a clock ticking in the same room every night. At first intrusive, then tolerable, then merely part of the atmosphere. Your boots tap steadily against the ground as you approach the iron gate. The latch is cold, almost metallic enough to stain your skin with its temperature. You push it open, and the hinge creaks in a monotone voice that could belong to any day of any week. It welcomes no one, yet denies no one either. It simply reacts. A foreman stands near the entrance, scanning a ledger with the focus of a man who understands numbers more deeply than he understands people. He does not raise his head as you pass. He only makes a small mark beside an entry, a movement so precise and controlled it might as well be part of the building's architecture. You know the mark is meant for you, though you will never see it. Your presence is recorded, not acknowledged. Inside the yard, wooden crates sit stacked in rows, each one containing the raw materials of the work ahead. Phosphorus powder lingers in the air, carried on faint drafts that move through the open doors. Even outside the main hall, you can sense its sharpness, like a warning delivered without urgency. You pause for a brief moment at the threshold, not to collect yourself. That luxury has long faded, but because the transition from outdoor fog to indoor fumes is always noticeable. The corridor before you is narrow, constructed of stone that seems permanently darkened. Light from overhead lamps rests heavily on the walls, creating muted reflections on the damp surfaces. The floorboards creak underfoot as you step inside, their groans familiar, predictable, and indifferent. The sound settles around you like a thin layer of dust, mingling with the faint echo of machinery deeper within. Your body adjusts automatically, shoulders slightly forward, breathing shallow, steps measured. Everything becomes smaller, quieter, purposeful. Beyond this corridor, the dipping room waits. You can already sense the warmth of the vats, the faint hiss of pots being heated, the shift in the air that comes from dozens of hands repeating the same movements without pause. The routine draws you forward, not by force, but by continual expectation. It is a path worn smooth by countless mornings identical to this one. You keep walking, letting the corridor lead you into the day that has already begun to shape itself around you. The fog remains outside, but the weight it carried settles into your bones with practiced ease. The door to the main floor stands open ahead, a rectangle of dim light that stretches across the floorboards like a quiet command. You step toward it, guided by habit and the muted certainty that this is where you are meant to be. The air grows warmer, the scent sharpens. The faint glow of heated phosphorus begins to mix with the lamplight, creating an atmosphere that is neither welcoming nor hostile, only procedural, steady and pervasive. You cross the threshold with a soft exhale, the kind that carries no emotion, only movement. The morning fog remains behind you, but its weight follows you inside, settling into the long hours ahead in a way that feels permanent, unalterable, and quietly inevitable. The iron gate closes behind you with a single, decisive clang that feels less like metal meeting metal and more like a sentence being read aloud. It is an action performed daily with meticulous regularity, a ceremony of entry that leaves no room for ambiguity. You do not think of it as locking you in. You think of it as confirming your presence, like a clerk ticking a box on a census sheet. The sound echoes down the yard and then is absorbed by the building's stone, becoming part of the architecture of your day. A man with a ledger stands beneath a hanging lamp, his face half lit and unreadable. The lamp throws a small island of light into the dim courtyard. Outside that circle, the yard blends back into shadow. The ledger is thick and well worn, its pages darkened at the edges, where hands have turned them so many times they have become soft and thin. He does not glance up when you near. His eyes remain on the paper, because the paper never needs consolation. It only needs to be accurate. You step forward and pause where directed, as if there is a groove in the ground, carved out by the repetition of others' feet. The foreman's pen moves in short, efficient strokes. When he looks up, his gaze does not search for your name. It searches for a mark, a code, a number that will place you within the factory system. He records more than arrival, time of entry, station assignment, apparent health, any visible stains, the sorts of notations that reduce people to data points. Your features do not interest him, your usefulness does. He makes a mark and slides the ledger toward a shelf where other ledgers sit in patient rows. Each book is a record of labour, pages of dates and quantities, lists of names set in columns like inventory. Somewhere in all that ink, your life is lodged between a date and a shorthand note. You will never see that entry again. It exists to satisfy procedure, to satisfy the expectation that a day has been accounted for. Beyond the ledger, a small counter accepts money like a small mouth. Wages are dispensed in narrow coins, counted with the same hushed thoroughness as the ledger. You receive a fraction of what your work seems to command. The amount is always precise, always disappointing, like a calculation that ended with the answer deliberately minimized. Once, long ago, you tried to hold the coin between finger and thumb to weigh its value as a comfort against the morning's cold. The coin felt like everything and nothing at once. Metal, promise, a measurement of your usefulness. You keep the coin tucked away and move on. A bell rings somewhere inside the courtyard, a slim metallic note that reverberates through the bones of the building. It is not musical. It is a device for partitioning time. The bell signals the start of many small rituals. The opening of doors, the correct positioning at benches, the checking of aprons and sleeves for stray marks of phosphorus. You find yourself already aligning to its rhythm. As you pass through the inner door, an attendant at another desk slides a plain card across to you. Its corners are rounded from frequent handling. On the card, a number is stamped in black ink. This number will dictate your place in the procession of work. It is a numeric identity that is easier to manage than a name. When someone calls the number, a head turns, a hand moves, tasks are assigned, all without the interruption of conversation. You tuck the card into your apron and feel the paper press against your skin like a small private weight. The corridor you follow narrows, and the walls seem to close in with the patient insistence of volume after volume on a shelf. Voices drift from the main rooms in fragments. The hiss of steam, the low clack of timers, the soft, incessant murmur of many hands. There are signs posted in steady printed type that tell you how to stand, where to place your feet, how long a dip should last. The instructions are simple, the sort that do not invite debate. They are written in a tone that presumes compliance, as if the words themselves were part of the machinery. You take your place at the dipping station and prepare the familiar motions. Before the vats, there is a short inspection that will be carried out by a woman who moves with businesslike calm. She checks aprons for integrity, sleeves for loose threads, nails for dirt. Her glance is swift and efficient. She catalogues the visible, and then looks for the small, less visible things. A faint powder on the side of your hand is noted, a thin trail leading from a previous dip. She does not scold, she simply makes a notation on a small slate, a tiny archive of infractions that will be consulted and acted upon in bureaucratic time. Her voice is measured when she says, "All right," and that word carries with it the authority of protocol. Around you, others arrange themselves into lines that make sense only to those who work here. Machines occupy their spaces as if they had always been placed there with intention. Benches are polished in the same way a ledger is smoothed by frequent reference. The room smells like metal and heated resin, with an undercurrent of phosphorus that slips into your nose like a faint, bitter secret. You breathe it in because you have no reason not to. It has become a component of your environment the way a roof is part of a house. The work begins without fanfare. Your hand, trained by repetition, dips several slender sticks into a pot of prepared paste. The movement is mechanical and precise. Submerge, lift, tilt, set to dry. The paste clings to the wood in glossy strings that catch the light and then sink back into dullness as they settle. You work in small segments, measuring each moment by the length of a dip and the count of sticks completed. There is a rhythm here that replaces thinking. Your mind narrows to the movement of fingers and the small, endless inventory of the immediate task. Occasionally, a supervisor passes along the row. He carries with him a small clipboard and a pencil, and he moves like a man who has learned to interpret the room in terms of efficiency. He notes the speed at which hands move, the neatness of bundles, whether sleeves are cuffed properly. His comments are not personal. They are adjustments to output. When he speaks, it is in the language of measurement. Faster here. Don't overdip. Keep counts correct. The words have all the tender inflection of a scale being adjusted. Lunch is announced by another bell. You collect your modest portion, a lump of bread wrapped in brown paper, and sit in a narrow row with neighbours who resemble you in ways that do not require acknowledgement. Conversation, when it occurs, is soft and utilitarian, an exchange of information about the smallest necessities. Food is described as fuel, nothing more ornate. You eat with one hand, the other still carrying the habit of motion. The taste of bread is tempered by the ever-present flavour of the workplace, faint metallic tang, slight chemical aftertaste. One learns to accept it as a feature of the day. There are rules about leaving the factory during hours. Exits are strictly monitored. If you step outside, you must hand over your number card to be checked and reissued upon return. The process is so methodical that it resembles a ritual. You once left for a brief moment to stand by a river and watch steam curl from a barge. The attendant required your card, compared the stamp to the ledger, and then returned it with a small detached nod. Your few minutes of air felt accounted for, packaged, and filed. The world beyond the gate remained accessible only through formal channels. When the shift ends, another ledger awaits you at the gate. The foreman's pen moves again in patient, exact strokes. He tallies numbers and records departures with the same calm detachment as arrivals. You hand over your number card and receive in return a small written stub that confirms the hours for which you will be paid. The stub is a thin, fragile proof of your labour. You fold it and place it carefully in your pocket, as though it might vanish if handled carelessly. Outside, the world has not changed in any way that matters. The iron gate swings closed and opens, for others in the same unhurried manner. People pass through it, carrying crates, carrying coins, carrying little more than the fact of their continued presence. The gate does not judge, it merely ensures that each body is noted, recorded, and released according to the rules laid down by those who prefer data to questions. You walk away with the same steady steps that brought you here. The ledger remains a weight you cannot see, but which subtly alters your posture. You have been counted in, and you have been counted out. Both actions are expressions of the same institutionalized indifference, comprehensive, efficient, and indifferent to the detail of human life. Somewhere in the ledger, your day has been reduced to a line. The entry exists, neat and complete, and it will wait there until someone turns the page. You fold your hands in your pockets and move back into the city's persistent grey. The gate rests behind you, its iron bars cool and impassive. You carry the small coin, the stamped stub, the faint odour of phosphorus in the hollow of your collar. These are the tangible parts of a day accounted for. The rest, your thoughts, the aches that will gather in your jaw tonight, the small luminescence at the edges of your mouth that no employer notices, remains private, lodged in the small places a ledger cannot measure. You have been entered into a system that counts much and cares little, and you continue because counting is, in this world, a kind of keeping time. You step through the wide doorway into a hall that is already speaking in its own steady language. The sound is immediate and total, a low metallic chorus of clanks and hisses, the soft slap of wood against wood, the whisper of cloth, the faraway chime of a bell that measures moments into manageable pieces. It wraps around you, not unkindly, but with an authority that leaves no room for inner argument. Thoughts contract, they rearrange themselves around the rhythm, making space for the work's cadence until your mind feels like an instrument tuned to the room's single note. Benches line the floor in regular rows. Each bench has marks on its edge where hands have rubbed the grain smooth over the years, small grooves that read like shorthand for countless mornings. Beyond the benches, the long vats of heated paste breathe out a faint, chemical steam that blurs the edges of the world and softens the lines between people. Lamps hang overhead, their light pooled and patient, illuminating hands more than faces. You move into place among other bodies already settled into the same motion. There is a relief in that familiarity, as if your limbs remember what your voice no longer needs to say. Your hands fall into pattern immediately. The first dip is automatic. The slender stick is gripped between thumb and forefinger, angled just so, and submerged into the glossy surface of the prepared dip. The viscous mixture clings with deliberate sluggishness, pulling thin threads that shine briefly and then snap back. You lift the stick, tilt it, let excess drip back slowly, and lay it on the slatted board to dry. The movement is economical, honed by repetition until it costs no thought. Your attention narrows to the feel of the wood, the temperature of the paste, the rhythm of breath that matches the motion. Inhale, dip, exhale, set down. Around you, other hands keep time. Somewhere to your right, a girl hums without words, her melody shaping itself to the dips and lifts. To your left, an older woman counts out sticks in a low voice, a soft litany of numbers that keeps her steady. The machines contribute. Small clacks and the measured clunk of a crank, and their noises become a backdrop rather than an intrusion. The entire room functions like a slow, deliberate machine built of human parts, each person a cog doing the expected work with quiet, uncomplaining efficiency. There are rules embedded into the soundscape. A particular sequence of taps signals the arrival of fresh paste. A different, sharper note warns of inspection. The supervisor's footsteps have a particular cadence that announces approach before his shadow crosses the workbench. Even silence is regulated. those brief scheduled pauses where the room seems to exhale and wrists rest for a count or two. You learn to interpret these sonic cues without thinking, and in that learning, your inner monologue thins to a thread. Fingers learn the language of the material. Wood, when new, feels porous and innocent. After repeated handling, it warms from your touch and takes on a faint sheen. The paste has its own memory. The first dip on a fresh batch feels different, brighter, more sticky. Later dips grow duller, heavier, as if the mixture has absorbed the room's fatigue. You note the difference in the way the paste glows under lamplight, how it catches the eye for an instant before settling into matte compliance. These are small observations, enacted like habits, and they quietly anchor you to the task. Your breathing adopts the factory's tempo. At first it is shallow, then it deepens into a sound that matches the clatter and becomes part of it. The work's regularity makes internal time feel measured in portions of movement rather than in minutes or hours. You do not count the day by the clock. You count by bundles tied, by how many dips fill a tray, by the soft, satisfying thunk when a stack is set down for the binder to tie. Those small objects of completion are milestones, practical and discreet, which your mind accepts without protest. Sound blurs into a kind of weather, a steady enveloping presence that muffles the louder, more troublesome aspects of living. It dulls the ache at the back of your throat. It softens the edge of weariness that gathers in your shoulders. In a strange way, the noise is protective. It keeps intrusive worries from settling in. It replaces the endless turning over of anxieties with a simpler metric. There is a cost to that protection, of course. The sound takes more than attention. It takes the raw material of surprise, the capacity to be startled by beauty or sorrow. Everything is smoothed down into function. You develop little rituals to keep the rhythm without breaking it. A quick flex of fingers between sets, a short private adjustment of apron ties, the discreet rub of thumb to forehead to clear a film of paste. These acts are private and small, allowances made within the system for a human body to persist. When your hands ache from the steady, repetitive motion, you press the base of your palm into the heel of your other hand and breathe slowly until the pain numbs into a dull memory. You have learned to treat your sensations like records to be filed and stored, not problems to be solved. Voices in the room are soft, economical, instructions, cautions, a brief joke to lubricate the pace. Laughter, when it appears, is quiet and measured, like someone conserving breath for the next task. Conversation that rises above the hum is rare. Most communication is efficient, clipped, exchanged in the same manner as the paste flows from vat to stick. You and your companions inhabit a shared silence, an understanding that the work must continue and that speech is a thing to be rationed. At intervals, a bell rings and the room shudders with attention. A pause for inspection, for maintenance, for counting. This bell does not interrupt, it organises. Hands slow to a stop, bundles are placed carefully, aprons are smoothed. A supervisor makes a round through the aisles with a slate of notations, marking what he sees with the same calm attention he pays to the ledger at the gate. His eyes run along the rows like a careful reader, scanning lines for errors. When he stops near you, you feel the concentrated weight of being observed and catalogued. Then the moment passes and the room exhales and the rhythm resumes. Sometimes the machines sputter or a tray slips and a soft clatter breaks the pattern. Such incidents create a ripple, a brief hush as heads turn and hands move to correct the error. These disturbances are handled with a steady efficiency that returns balance quickly. No one reacts with surprise, only with the mild displeasure of something requiring adjustment. It is all business. There is no space for melodrama here. Even small troubles are processed and filed away. Your sense of time becomes elastic. Hours thin, stretch, shrink, and fold into one another until the day feels like a long, continuous sheet of measured motion. The concept of free time feels distant, a foreign phrase spoken by others who do not share this particular cadence. Between dips, your mind allows small, deserted corridors for thought, images of a river you once saw, a child's face briefly remembered, but the work's sound draws you back with reliable insistence. These moments of drift are small and fragile. They straighten and fade as the pace cools, and the next set demands your attention. There is a quiet intimacy to working shoulder to shoulder with others in near silence. You become acquainted with the small details of faces turned away, the way one woman's fingers twitch when she is tired, the callous pattern on another's thumb from years of gripping, the slight tilt of a head when a memory surfaces. These are the human textures that persist beneath the machine's steady voice. They are the places where, if you listen closely, the room hums not with industry, alone but with lives continued. As the hours pass, the sound shapes the edges of your awareness until your body moves on habit and your mind measures itself in the completion of tasks. You become a keeper of rhythm, an element of the room's steady law. The noise does not erase you, it organizes you, sorting the day into manageable units and giving you, paradoxically, a strange kind of peace. You move through it as if guided by a slow metronome, and in that movement you find a consistent, if muted, shelter from the sharpness of life outside. When the bell finally signals a longer pause, midday, a moment to breathe more than the brief counts that punctuate work, you notice how the room shifts tone. Conversations lengthen by a syllable. Posture eases slightly. The sound does not stop, it only changes shape, allowing for a softer register before the steady rhythm resumes. You fold your hands and breathe, letting the sound cradle you for a moment, keeping your thoughts in slow, obedient motion. The work continues, the room's voice keeps speaking, and you answer with the small, exact movements you have learned to make. This is what you do. You enter into the sound and let it replace the chatter of the mind, letting the day be measured in precise acts and small accumulating bundles. In the factory's hush of continuous motion, your existence becomes a soft and steady instrument, tuned to a song of labour that both dulls and steadies the heart. The bell returns you to the benches. You lift your hands and find them already wearing the day's residue, a thin, almost oily film that refuses to be named anything other than consequence. It gathers at the base of your nails, clings to the creases of your knuckles, and when you hold a piece of wood between finger and thumb, it seems to stain the grain with its own shadow. No one announces it. There is no ceremony for the way materials become part of you. The paste is not only delivered into the wood, it finds its way into you, an uninvited addition to your daily inventory. White phosphorus is pale when it first touches the tongue of the dip, a soft, waxy substance that takes the shape of the object it wets. Under lamplight it sometimes appears almost pearlescent, and in the dim corners of the room it throws back a small, thin gleam. You watch it coat the sticks in a manner so predictable you could catalogue the minutes by it. The paste clings and then dries. It leaves an almost imperceptible residue on your skin that grows in familiarity until you mistake it for your own texture. You try simple rituals that used to comfort you. Washing hands in cool water, scrubbing with a bit of soap if you can sneak it between tasks. The water runs grey with the film of the day, as if the room itself has soaked into each draft. Sometimes a faint phosphorescence seems to linger in the basin after you leave, like a small, private proof that chemistry keeps better records than memory. The scrubbing removes the surface, but not the fact beneath. The substance is practiced at persistence. It insinuates into the skin's folds, into the mouth's corners, into places you do not inspect unless you are compelled. The smell is subtle at first, a barely there metallic tang, and then it tells you what it is. It lingers around your jaw like a note on the margin of a page, and eventually You begin to recognize its signature as easily as you recognize the bell. The fumes carry, on a breath, into the back of the throat and lodge as if making a small deposit. When you swallow, there is a faint, bitter trace. When you speak, the taste is present like a signature at the end of a line. As days stack into one another, the compound's presence becomes a quiet punctuation in your life. At night, when lamplight is softer and the city's outline has retreated to shadow, you catch glimpses of something that is not rehearsal. A dim inner glow at the edge of your mouth, a faint luminescence that seems to answer the low light. It is private and shameful, not because it is obvious, but because you imagine it marking you in a way that belongs to no ledger. When you bite into a scrap of bread, the grain seems to flicker under your teeth, and for a moment the room remembers a different kind of brightness, one not granted by the foreman or the bell. There are whispers about what it does to teeth, but the language used is clinical and distant. Erosion, decay, a condition that has its own name in doctor's notes, and the careful shorthand of patent medicine. You feel the work of it more than you hear the terms. Your jaw begins to ache in an even, administrative sort of way, like a clock that has been wound too many times. The ache is not dramatic. It registers as a persistent, bureaucratic blot on sensation. At night, your mouth tastes metallic, and in the dark, you feel as though you're carrying a small, inert lantern beneath your skin. Others in the room show different signs. A woman across the bench has a small whitening at the edge of her gums. A younger girl coughs now, with a sound that is sudden and dry. No one blames the material aloud. To do so would require a conversation longer than the day allows. Instead, an economy of gestures emerges. A hand tucked reflexively to the face, a napkin folded more deliberately, the subtle avoidance of a full smile. In a place where every expression is measured against production, those small precautions become the only language of concern. Management tolerates the evidence in the ways institutions do, with occasional inspections and the insistence of cleanliness. The posters on the wall advise rinsing, suggest methods for wiping away stains, advise the use of cloths and occasional rest. These are written in formal type, courteous and removed, as if advice could stand between manufacture and harm. When an inspector visits, their remarks are recorded in the ledger, a note is made, someone takes a tally and the factory continues. The paperwork gives the impression of action, though the action itself is measured in tokens. A pail here, a notice there, a brief pause for the sake of appearances. You learn to perform compliance, to keep sleeves rolled exactly as directed, to wear the thin barrier of cloth at your wrists, to use the small cloth provided for wiping hands between sets. These measures are not protection in any substantial sense. They are gestures that simulate care. They allow operations to proceed while producing the semblance of attention. The real persistence of the compound is quieter, mathematical, and indifferent to performance. Sometimes you daydream about light that is not a consequence, a sun that warms without consuming, a small lamp that belongs not to work but to reading, to writing letters that do not need to be folded for economy. Such thoughts are small and brittle. The room's routines reassert themselves with the soft force of habit. Still, there are evenings when you hold your jaw and imagine brightness that would not be a symptom, and for a few breaths the world allows a different warmth. There are practical consequences you track, like accounts. Eating becomes an act with further considerations. You avoid biting fingernails because the habit passes residue into the mouth. You take care when placing a hand near your lips. You learn to keep your palm away from teeth that are already sensitive. Each small adjustment is an inventory choice, a way to minimize the entry points the compound exploits. These choices are private, enacted in the same quiet manner as the factory's cataloguing. They are not heroic, they are simply pragmatic. At times, a clerk from a nearby medical office will make a round with a small book and a neat pen. The clerk's voice is low, polite. They ask questions you answer in the shortest possible manner. A notation is made. For some, this results in a recommendation, rest, medicinal rinses, a course of treatment suggestive of better days. For others, the note is merely another line, and no further action follows. You file these interactions the way you file small receipts. Keep for reference, might be useful, probably will not be. Most nights you return to the narrow room that holds your few belongings and stand at the small basin. You look at your hands as if they belong to someone else. The thin film shimmering faintly in the lamplight, the small persistent stains along the nails. You try to wash until the water runs clear, but clarity is elusive. The residue moves into the lines of your skin and lingers beneath the surface like a quiet annotation. Sleep comes in increments, often interrupted by the taste at the back of your throat, the ache in your jaw, the small worry that has the arithmetic of paperwork. Yet even these fragments do not become drama. They are recorded and set aside, as if your body were filling in the columns of a ledger in neat, careful handwriting. In the dark, you sometimes think your teeth throw back a faint light when you talk or when you laugh. The image is absurd, private, and slightly alarming, and you quickly smother the thought so that it does not become a habit. Beyond the factory's hours, the city has other lights, gas lamps, a distant fire, the occasional glint of shop windows. They feel ordinary and indifferent to your particular dimness. You move among them with the knowledge that the phosphorus has altered you in ways not easily enumerated, that it has become part of the ledger of your life, a column marked with its own subtle notation. Morning will come, as it always does, and with it the routine tasks that produce both livelihood and attrition. For now, you hold the evidence in your hands and feel the quiet arithmetic of it, a compound that settles where you touch, that leaves a trace, even after water and soap have done their best. It is an account that writes itself into skin and breath and jaw, and it accrues in the same patient manner as wages. You fold your hand away and return to the rhythm the bell commands, carrying with you the small, luminous proof that some things insist on remaining, even when everything else is filed away. The ache begins quietly, almost modestly, as if asking permission to exist. It settles first at the hinge of your jaw, an even, deliberate pressure that feels more like bookkeeping than pain. You become aware of it in the same way you notice a draft in a long corridor, subtle, persistent, woven into the architecture of the day. While your hands continue their work, the sensation tucks itself neatly beneath your awareness, rising only when the room grows still. You do not speak of it. Speech requires movement of the jaw, and movement sharpens the ache into something more defined. The room around you is accustomed to silence. It expects it. You learn to keep your mouth closed, to communicate with nods and small gestures, to swallow carefully so the pressure does not spike into a throb. Even breath becomes something you manage with care. By the time afternoon light begins its slow decline through the high windows, the ache grows denser, heavier. It anchors itself behind your gums, pulsing with a slow, bureaucratic regularity, like a stamp pressing into paper over and over again. The sensation is not dramatic. It is administrative, steady, factual, a record being kept by nerves that do not negotiate. Across the benches, others sit with similar quiet postures. You read their discomfort the way you read the factory's routines, not by words, but by the stillness between motions. A girl a few places down chews her lip compulsively, her face motionless except for the small flicker of tension near her temples. Another holds her jaw with 2 fingers when she thinks no one sees. These are gestures of a shared ledger, a silent column of symptoms that everyone contributes to but no one names. The foreman walks the aisles without acknowledging any of it. His eyes scan work, not faces. His attention is fixed on output, not expression. When he stops near your bench to inspect the trays, his shadow falls across your hands, not your mouth. He checks numbers, counts bundles, adjusts quantities on forms. Pain is not part of his accounting. It is not a metric worthy of notation. The day ends with the ache having settled deeper, an intrusive tenant nesting behind your molars, filing its quiet reports into the bone. The bell rings, equipment stills, bodies straighten with care, and you wrap your shawl around your shoulders before stepping outside. The moment you breathe in the cold air, the sensation shifts again, tightening, as though the cold sharpens the lines of the record being written inside you. Walking through the dim street, you feel the ache pulse with each step. The city does not concern itself with your pace. Its streets are built on the premise that people will move through them, regardless of condition. The fog hangs lower now, and the lamps glow with a steady persistence that gives the illusion of warmth. You find yourself walking with your mouth slightly parted, seeking a posture that will ease the pressure, but none offers relief. Each method of holding your jaw is a variant of discomfort. By the time you reach your room, the ache has spread into a low throb that pulses through your cheekbones. You light the lamp, and the faint glow reveals a truth you keep hidden, even from yourself. When you lift your hand to your face, your fingertips tremble. You bring them away and feel the faintest trace of warmth leaving the skin, as though your jaw has developed a small fever of its own. You stand before the small scrap of mirror hanging above your basin. The glass is old, clouded around the edges, and the reflection it offers is never quite crisp. Still, you lean forward, lips parted, and examine the line of your teeth. At first, you see nothing but their pale, uneven shapes. Then the lamp flickers, and in that slight dimming, you catch the faintest shimmer, a soft, ghostly brightness along the gum line, a thin radiance that seems to cling to the edges of enamel. It is not dramatic. It is not the vivid glow of stories whispered among beds. It is an understated flicker, almost polite, as if the phosphorus is reminding you of its presence without wishing to intrude. But the sight freezes you. It confirms what your jaw has tried to tell you for weeks. Something is accumulating, patiently, systematically under the skin. You shut your mouth quickly, covering the glow as one covers a private worry. Your breath feels strange, slightly warm, metallic, as if it carries traces of something smouldering beneath the surface. You rinse with the water from the basin, though the rinse stings, and the ache deepens with each motion. The pain is still not sharp. It is procedural. It follows its own quiet schedule. When you lie down, you try to position your head so the ache disperses. Pillow against cheek, cheek against hand, chin tucked down. It makes no difference. The pain rearranges itself into new patterns, each one steady and precise, like a metronome set to the tempo of your nerves. At some point, your jaw begins to pulse in harmony with your heartbeat, one soft throb answering another in the darkness. In these moments, your mind drifts to other girls you have seen slip away from the benches, taken by relatives or by doctors who speak in low tones. You remember the sight of a girl's cheek swollen like rising dough, her expression carefully blank as she left the yard. You recall the whisper of a name spoken under breath. Phossy jaw, a soft term almost affectionate in sound, masking something far less gentle. You think of it now with a quiet dread that does not hurry, just settles alongside the ache like an unwelcome companion. At the factory, the condition is not mentioned. Silence is the default mode of communication. Silence as compliance, silence as protection, silence as the only acceptable form of protest. The ache becomes just another entry in your day's accounting, alongside the hours worked, the bundles tied, the coins received. Pain in this place is an unspoken tax. In the days that follow, you learn to brace for the ache before it begins. You wake with a jaw already stiff, as if preparing itself for a day of use. Breakfast becomes brief and cautious. Each bite is measured like a calculation. By the time you reach the yard, the sensation has settled fully, and you greet it with the dull acceptance of someone checking an item off a list. Your fellow workers mirror your discomfort in their own ways. A girl beside you now speaks less, her voice reduced to brief murmurs. Another presses a cloth to her face during breaks, eyes downcast, breath shallow. There is a strange solidarity in the collective avoidance. Each person aware, each person choosing silence. You sense in their posture that they carry their own flickers of light. Tucked behind lips sealed against the cold, you develop the habit of touching your jaw lightly when no one watches. The warmth beneath your fingers feels unnaturally focused, as if the bone itself is reacting. At times you imagine a small, internal glow illuminating the inside of your mouth, creating traces visible only to you. It is a foolish thought, yet the ache makes it feel plausible, almost factual. It grows worse on damp days. Moisture seems to draw the ache outward, extending its reach toward the ear and down the neck. You work with your head held still, your movements more careful, more contained. The routine absorbs these adjustments easily. The room does not notice. The sound of dipping, stacking, bundling moves around you like a cloak, swallowing individual discomforts into the larger rhythm. One evening, as you wash your face in the fading light, you see it again, the faint glow edging along the curve of a tooth, like a tiny signal being transmitted through bone. The lamp behind you trembles, the light softens, and the glow becomes briefly clearer before fading back into shadow. You close your mouth tightly, pressing your lips together, as if to seal the evidence inside. You know better than to mention it. Speaking would only deepen the ache, and the factory has no columns for reporting symptoms. So you carry the glow with the same resigned efficiency you carry trays. It accompanies you through each motion, each breath, each night where sleep comes in clipped segments. It writes itself into you with slow persistence. Your teeth continue their quiet whispering, small warnings offered without urgency, as if even the pain understands that there is nothing to be done. You move through your days with this private, luminous burden, acknowledging it only in silence, allowing it to take its place among the other invisible records your body keeps. And the ache, steady and disciplined, continues to mark time inside your jaw. Another entry in a life measured by quiet endurance. By the time the midday bell breaks through the distant hum of work, your body has already begun shifting toward the promise of pause. The ache in your jaw pulses in slow, dutiful intervals, but the sound of the bell folds itself around the pain, dampening it just enough to let you move. You untie your apron with deliberate fingers, brushing away flecks of dust and residue that cling to the fabric. Then step into the corridor, where the air shifts to something marginally cooler. It is not fresh, but it is a different flavour of used, and that alone feels like a reprieve. The loading bay waits at the far end of the hall, a large drafty space where crates form uneven towers, and where the aroma of machinery mixes with the smell of wood, rope, and occasional horse sweat from the carts outside. You make your way toward a familiar stack of crates, each plank worn smooth where many backs have leaned. Many lunches have unfolded in silence. Settling onto a low crate, you let your shoulders drop by one careful inch, the closest thing to relaxation the factory permits. Your lunch is simple, predictable, folded into a small cloth that has absorbed more workday scents than your clothing ever has. You unfold it slowly. A piece of bread, yesterday's hardness disguised beneath its dull crust, lies waiting. You tear into it because hunger insists, not because appetite recommends it. The first bite is always startling, not because of flavour, but because of the absence of one. It tastes dry, hollow, carrying only the faint trace of the room you just left. Metal, heated paste, lingering fumes. Even when you chew slowly, the bread dissolves with a texture reminiscent of dust settling on your tongue. Around you, other workers take their places. They lower themselves onto crates, overturned buckets, or coils of rope, each choosing a spot with the instinctive practicality of people who know the value of minor consistencies. A few pull from tin lunch pails, others unfold scraps of cloth similar to yours. Despite the different vessels, the contents rarely vary. A ration of bread, perhaps a small wedge of cheese if luck or planning allowed, sometimes an apple shrunken by the cold. The factory's air weaves through each item, tinting everything with machinery's quiet aftertaste. No one talks much. The loading bay carries a hush that feels more deliberate than the silence at the benches. Here the quiet has an edged softness, shaped by the understanding that rest must not invite attention. Breaks are permitted, but drawing focus is not. So the group sitting around you eats in a shared rhythm. Chew, swallow, adjust posture, glance at nothing in particular. Even rest follows structure. You watch as a girl across from you pulls her shawl tighter around her shoulders before taking small bites of her bread. Her fingers tremble faintly, not from cold, but from exhaustion that has accumulated quietly, hour by hour. Another girl, seated on an upturned crate in the corner, unwraps a small tin containing something stewed, though the smell rising from it has already merged with the factory's odour until no distinction remains. She eats mechanically, spoon lifting and lowering at a pace identical to her dipping motions at the bench. The quiet is broken only by the occasional thud of a cart unloading, the scrape of a crate being moved, or a foreman's distant call. You find that these disruptions barely register. The soundscape of work swallows them before they can become real interruptions. Even the air shifts with a kind of discipline, moving in through the open loading doors, picking up dust from the floor, and settling again in gentle drifts. You break off another piece of bread. The flavour feels thin and distant, and you swallow more out of obligation than desire. The air around you holds a metallic tang that has seeped into every corner of your clothes and clings faintly to your hair. When you lick your lips, they taste of iron and something bitter, the remnants of fumes that followed you here like a quiet shadow. The ache in your jaw pulses again, stronger this time. You press your mouth closed, giving the muscles a moment to settle. Eating has become a negotiation. One bite softened into small pieces so your teeth do not protest too loudly. You watch how others manage. Some use fingertips to flatten bread before chewing. Others tear their crusts into threads, letting them soften on the tongue. Each technique is a private adaptation, a small method of enduring without mention. The girl beside you finishes her portion with a careful final swallow, her face still. She wipes her mouth with the back of her hand, leaving a faint streak of dust on her cheek. Without a word, she stands and folds her cloth, tucking it back into her pocket. Her routine is precise, almost ritualistic, as though completing lunch is another task requiring careful execution. A brief draft sweeps through the loading bay as the outer door creaks open. A horse stands in the street just beyond it, steam rising from its flanks, harness straps creaking as it shifts. The smell of the animal mixes with the familiar scent of machinery, producing a fleeting reminder of air untouched by phosphorus. You hold your breath as if savouring a fragment of something cleaner, though it fades as quickly as it came. A few workers step toward the door to stretch their legs in the cold air. They stand just outside the threshold, not daring to wander. Distance is monitored, even during breaks. You observe their silhouettes framed by fog, each figure holding their shoulders stiff, each breath visible in thin white threads that disappear almost immediately. Even in this moment of pause, their bodies betray the same posture of caution worn at the workbench. You remain seated, turning the last piece of bread over in your hands before eating it. When you place it into your mouth, your jaw tightens sharply. A jolt that seems to reverberate up into your temples. You breathe through your nose, slow and measured, waiting for the sensation to dull. The pain eventually settles into its familiar rhythm, and you swallow with care. Beside you, a woman in her 40s unwraps a bit of cheese and cuts it into squares with the edge of a dull knife. She offers a piece to the younger girl next to her, who accepts with a grateful nod. The exchange is quiet and practiced, an act of muted generosity that exists within the parameters of the room. No one makes a sound about it. Giving here is not announced. It is performed with the same restraint as work. Farther down, a cluster of younger girls sits close together, their hands wrapped around steaming mugs of something brewed hastily from boiled water and scraps of tea leaves. The steam curls upward, disappearing inches above their heads. One girl holds her mug with both hands, letting the warmth seep into her fingers. Her eyes remain lowered, fixed on the floorboards. She takes small sips, each one slow and cautious, as though swallowing too quickly might disturb something fragile inside her. You watch them without judgment, without envy. Rest is not a shared emotion. It is a shared function. Everyone consumes what they brought, then waits for the next bell. It is not a time to grow closer, only a time to lessen the distance between exhaustion and the next required motion. The space between the morning's strain and the afternoon's heaviness feels thin, stretched like cloth worn too many times. You fold your cloth and tuck it into your pocket. Your hands settle into your lap, with a stiffness that belongs more to bone than muscle. You allow yourself a single long breath, letting it fill the base of your lungs before releasing it slowly. The loading bay's air is colder now, carrying with it the faint whisper of the street. The cold stings your teeth when you inhale, the pain briefly sharper, then settling back into its steady pattern. The brief respite ends with the clear, metallic ring of the bell. It slices through the quiet with a precision that leaves no room for delay. Bodies shift almost in unison. Crates creak beneath changing weight. Footsteps move toward the corridor with the resigned steadiness of people returning to a duty that does not care whether they are ready. You rise, smoothing your skirt and drawing your shawl tighter. The taste of bread still lingers faintly, dry, metallic, neither pleasant nor unpleasant, just present, just another necessary intake to carry you through the day. The loading bay fades behind you as you return to the hall. The machinery's hum grows louder with each step, folding you back into the rhythm that waits without impatience. Your fingers resume their habitual twitch, preparing themselves for the next sequence of motions. The scent of phosphorus drifts faintly through the corridor, settling over you like a familiar coat. Lunch dissolves into memory as you step through the doorway. The day gathers itself again, precise and indifferent, ready to continue its long, methodical unfolding. The bell dissolves whatever thin softness the break had offered. Your hands fall back into motion as though returning to their natural state, and the hours ahead stretch out with a kind of disciplined stillness. The room accepts you again without ceremony. It has no preference for who occupies which bench. It only requires that the pattern continues. You settle into your place, lift the first slender stick of the afternoon, and feel the day flatten around you like a sheet being smoothed over a bed. The air is warmer now, thickened by the hours of work already completed. The paste in the vats has taken on a faint heaviness, as though it too has grown tired. The steam curls upward in quieter threads, clinging to the low ceiling before dissipating. You inhale without question. Breathing is not something you think about anymore. The scent of chemicals and heated wood has become so familiar that it no longer registers as foreign. It is simply the atmosphere in which the afternoon unfolds. Your hands move steadily, dipping and lifting with the same measured pace they have been taught. The rhythm is neither hurried nor slow, just enough to satisfy the supervisors, who walk the aisles like quiet sentinels. Their boots make soft, deliberate sounds against the boards, and you always know when one approaches without looking up. The shift structure lives inside your bones as reliably as hunger or fatigue, A strange elasticity takes hold of time. The afternoon does not feel long. It feels wide, stretched so thinly across the hours that you cannot grasp where one moment ends and the next begins. You think about the sticks moving through your fingers, each one identical to the one before it. The monotony performs a kind of erasure, smoothing out thoughts that might otherwise disrupt the steady pattern. Your mind grows quiet, not because it is peaceful, but because the room's continuous hum creates a boundary your thoughts do not cross. You sense the weight of exhaustion gathering, not abruptly, but with methodical patience. It does not come in waves, it settles gradually, the way dust accumulates. Your shoulders begin to droop, in increments too small to notice individually. Your eyelids blink more slowly. Your fingers hesitate for a fraction of a second before resuming their pace. Yet you keep moving. Fatigue here is not a reason to stop. It is merely another texture of the day. The girls around you take on the same muted posture. No one mentions tiredness. Mentioning it would require the kind of voice that belongs to a different world. Instead, there are subtle adjustments in the room. A woman to your left now braces her wrist against the bench every so often, relieving the strain on her fingers. Another across from you shifts her weight from one foot to the other with a slow sway, keeping her legs from stiffening. The tiny acts of self-preservation feel like contraband, a private resistance hidden beneath the veneer of compliance. The supervisor passes through again, tapping the frame of a vat with the tip of his pencil. The sound is thin and clean, slicing through the fabric of the room's steady hum. You do not look up, but you feel the subtle tightening of posture ripple through the workers nearby. The pencil taps again, once, twice, then silence. He moves on. His absence is less noticeable than his presence. Yet something in the room relaxes by an imperceptible margin. Your jaw aches again, the familiar pressure returning with the warm air. Afternoon always worsens it. Heat encourages swelling, and swelling tightens the nerves. You swallow carefully, adjusting your mouth so the motion does not tug at the place where pain likes to nest. The glow will come later in the dim hours, but the ache is here now, accompanying the tasks with obedient consistency. You breathe through your nose, slow and patient, and let the sensations settle, the way the room settles around the sound of machinery. A distant clang echoes from the far side of the hall, followed by the muted gasp of steam escaping from a pipe. No one reacts. These sounds are part of the machinery's vocabulary, a language of pressure, release, and continual adjustment. The machines call out in the afternoon the same way they do in the morning, though their voice gains a slight rasp as the hours wear on. You find comfort in the predictability of it. It tells you exactly where you are in the stream of the day. The light filtering through the windows has shifted by now, becoming thin and slanted. Dust motes float within it, moving slowly as though the light itself had thickened. The lamps take over gradually, their glow growing in authority as the day retreats. Under their dim yellow cast, the sticks you dip seem to lose definition, becoming less objects and more motions. You watch your hands working and wonder, briefly, how many sticks have passed through your fingers since morning. The number is too large to hold in your mind, so you let it dissolve. When the ache in your shoulders grows too persistent, you straighten your back for a few seconds, then return to your posture. There is a tacit understanding here. Discomfort must be tolerated with the same quiet patience as the repetition of tasks. You have learned to recognize the difference between pain that demands attention and pain that simply occupies space. The latter is more common. It settles like an uninvited guest and waits without expectation. A girl faintly hums from the far bench, a slow wandering tune with no real melody. It blends into the room's hum so seamlessly that it feels less like singing and more like another machine operating just out of sight. The tune rises, falls, then disappears entirely when her supervisor approaches. When he leaves, she does not resume it. Even small comforts must be rationed. The afternoon drags on without markers. There is no singular moment you can point to and say, here is where it changed. The hours leak into each other like diluted ink, and you move through them without resistance. You hear your own breath syncing with the room's rhythm. Each inhalation, a metered pause between tasks. Your hands continue their choreography. Dip, lift, tilt, place, repeating the same sequence with no variation. It feels as if the motion has become a part of your body's architecture, something you would perform even if the vats and sticks vanished. The heat intensifies slightly as the vats are replenished. Fresh paste brings with it a brighter sheen and a sharper scent, cutting through the heaviness of the afternoon air. You feel the sting of its fumes behind your eyes, but you blink it away. Another girl turns her face aside for a moment, letting the irritation pass, then resumes her work with the same pace as before. Resistance is brief, routine is long. When a tray is full, you lift it with careful hands and carry it to the drying rack. The motion requires balance, precision, and a kind of bowed dignity that seems out of place in a room designed for efficiency. You set the tray down gently, the sticks arranged in perfect rows like soldiers awaiting orders. Then you walk back to your bench and continue. The walk to the rack and back is the closest thing the afternoon allows to variation. The sound of scratching chalk reaches you from somewhere behind the vats. A supervisor marks down counts, adjusting numbers with a silence that feels colder than reprimand. You hear the chalk again, soft, deliberate, final, before the sound stops. The record has been updated, the work continues. The ache in your limbs deepens, your feet shift restlessly in your boots, craving the relief of movement that the day does not provide. Your neck stiffens, your fingers grow tender at the joints, and still the motions do not change. You do not mark the time by hours anymore. Instead, you measure by trays filled, vats emptied, and the slight dimming of daylight through the stained windows. Eventually, almost imperceptibly, the atmosphere inside the room changes. It grows quieter, not because the machines have slowed, but because the workers' bodies have begun anticipating the end of the shift. Movements become slightly heavier, breath slower, eyes more often fixed on nothing in particular. The afternoon is drawing to its close, though nothing within the room announces it directly. You simply feel the ending gather itself in the subtle shifts of posture and pace. Your hands complete another sequence and another, until the bell cuts through the room with its clear, metallic certainty. You pause with your fingers halfway to the vat. The sound settles into the walls, and for a moment the room feels suspended, caught between the last completed task and the next expectation. You release a slow breath. The afternoon has passed in the way it always does. Undistinguished, unbroken, swallowed by repetition. You gather your tools, untie your apron, and prepare to step away from the bench. The ache in your jaw pulses once more, as if reminding you that the day has left its trace. Then you move toward the corridor with the others, the shape of the room retreating behind you as quietly as it had guided you through the hours. You follow the corridor out of the hall and into the dim light of the main floor, where the air still tastes faintly of heated resin and dust. There among the rows of benches and drying racks, he moves with a measured stride, neither hurried nor slow, an actor who performs precision as a virtue. The supervisor's boots kiss the boards in a rhythm that reads like a ledger. 1 step, 2 steps, pause, make a note. He carries a small slate and a pencil, and the slate is as much his language as the machines are theirs. When he stops, it is because something in the room has required a numerical correction. He does not ask questions that invite answers. He does not offer sympathy or develop a rapport. His tools are metrics. Time punched against output, weight measured against expectation, bundles counted and recounted until the numbers align. When he speaks, the sound of his voice is compact and businesslike, shaped to fit the needs of production rather than the needs of people. 20 more here, he will say, and a girl at the bench will adjust her pace, as though responding to a clock. Less paced, he might add, and hands will change their angle, accommodating the instruction without pause. The tone is devoid of intonation that would imply care. It is the voice of calculation. You learn to translate his utterances into movement without treating them as speech. They are, in your experience, commands written in arithmetic rather than letters. A nod replaces yes. A quick tightening of cloth around the wrist substitutes for explanation. When he consults his slate, it is not to recount a story, but to correct a balance sheet. The output of this bench versus the quota for the week. The percentage of imperfect sticks allowed before a reprimand is issued. The slate is a small, hard authority everyone knows to obey. His inspections are precise rituals. He stops by a bench, glances at the trays, and traces with his pencil the imagined lines of productivity. He tilts his slate, measuring the alignment of stacks with a glance that suggests he sees numbers as clearly as others see faces. When he points out an error, a tray slightly over full, a bundle tied too loosely, he does so with the brevity of an accountant, noting an imbalance. The worker corrects it with hands that have learned to move before thought. The action is quick, practiced, and final. You notice how his presence changes the room's temperature, not physically, but atmospherically. There is a tightening in the air when he approaches, a small collective holding of breath. Conversations dip into hushed tones, movements that had been languid become more pointed. Where your hands had been permitted a slight looseness, they now carry a crispness, a precision that mimics the supervisor's own method. It is not fear exactly, it is a kind of institutional respect, an acknowledgement that the numbers in the ledger will be checked and will hold weight. He favours metrics that are easily recorded. Weight is a favourite measure. Trays are set on scales that click and declare an amount. Bundles are weighed and compared to a standard. Time is another. He will time a set, pencil, tapping the slate, and then divide the output by the seconds elapsed, as though performing a calculation that proves the bench's worth. The results of these small assessments are not spoken aloud as criticisms. They are written, and the writing is where the consequence lives. When there is a shortfall, his corrective notes are impersonal and efficient. A mark on the slate, a shorthand symbol next to a name, and the girl who shoulders the deficit must make up the difference tomorrow. The sanction is not dramatic. It is administrative. It affects shifts. It reduces small comforts. It tightens margins. You find that the loss is easiest to accept when it is precisely quantified, when a number can be subtracted from a day and recorded as an equation closed. The human cost becomes a variable in the ledger, calculable and therefore tolerable. He also inspects cleanliness with a similar devotion to arithmetic. He will lift an apron sleeve, peer at a cuff, and make a brief mark. The factory likes to call these measures health precautions. They are presented as hygiene, neatness, the industry's own version of care. Yet they function within the system the way a compass functions within a map. They orient production without challenging its aim. Cloth is handed out, cloth is used, a nod is made. The evidence of action is filed away like an itemized receipt. The supervisor's language is contagious. It influences how others speak and how they imagine themselves. Conversations that might have been stories become reports. Bundles done, tray full, paste good today. The backs and hands of the workers begin to mirror his simplicity. It takes little time for you to find yourself thinking in measures the way he does, imagining your day in tray counts, inventory checks, and the small currency of minutes. Even at home, you find you measure the day with the same economy, folding thoughts into neat columns so they may be stored without blemish. Sometimes, in the quiet moments between rounds, you watch him study the room like someone checking the balance on a sheet of accounts. His face is unreadable. It reflects the slate's impartiality. You imagine what it must be to reduce a room full of hands and mouths to a tidy tally. There is an efficiency to it, but also a small cruelty, because numbers cannot notice the slow glow behind someone's jaw, or the way a young girl presses a cloth to her cheek when she thinks no one sees. The slate does not record those things. It is blind to the private currency of suffering. On rare occasions, the supervisor will grant a brief leniency, an allowance for a slower pair of hands, a minor defect overlooked for a day. When he does, it is not kindness so much as calculation, a strategic toleration that temporarily smooths production curves. The relief felt by the affected workers is muted and careful. They accept it the way someone receives a small adjustment to a balance. Gratitude is not loud here. It is contained and measured, like the rest of life under his gaze. Occasionally, a girl will be summoned to the small office by the door, her slate clutched in a hand that shakes. You watch them go, step by step, until they disappear behind the door, where the supervisor's voice will be used in a different tone, less public, more pointed. When they return, their pace is altered subtly. They carry themselves with a small stoop, as if the slate had recorded something about them that they did not wish to keep. No explanation is offered. The room accepts their altered posture because it fits the existing calculations. You have times when you resent the neatness of his records, when you wish someone would measure not just trays and paste, but the cost exacted on mouths and sleep. The thought is fleeting and impractical. It does not fit into the room's way. You set the notion aside the way you set aside a scrapped stick. Useful, perhaps for a different purpose, but not for the task at hand. As the day's light shifts and the lamps press their softer glow into the corners, the supervisor makes his last rounds. His pencil scratches the final notations for the day, sealing the accounts until morning. When he leaves the floor, the room feels almost immediately less taut. The strict geometry of measures relaxes into the gentler, human rhythms that persist under the weight of rules. Hands slow a fraction. Breath eases a hair. Yet the impression of his method lingers, as if the slate's ink has seeped into the boards and will take time to fade. You close your own small ledger that evening in your head. Trays tallied, corrections noted, time recorded. The supervisor's presence is another column in the day's accounting, a clinical weight that shapes how you move and how you think. You carry it with you as you step into the corridor, the memory of the slate's marks settling into the same place that houses the ache in your jaw and the faint residue on your fingers. The numbers are not cruel in tone. Their cruelty is subtle, embedded in calculation. They make sense to those who reside in the room, and in that sense you learn to speak their language, answering in nods and precise movements, letting your life be measured as efficiently as a tray of matches. When the lamps have been dimmed to their steady yellow and the supervisors walk away with their slates tucked under an arm, the ledger remains. It sits on a small shelf behind the foreman's desk, like a heavy, patient thing, its spine softened by hands that have opened it hundreds of times. You have never seen the ledger opened at length. You know it by the weight of its presence. It is a record-keeper's altar, a place where arrivals, departures, and tiny notations of health are filed in columns that look like the bones of the day. Names are written there, in a hand that prefers brevity to flourish. A name, a date, a code for station, a mark for infractions, a shorthand for time off. Each notation reduces a person's day to a line in a book that refuses to call the thing. It records a life. You imagine the ledger's pages like shelves, each one bearing the small weight of hours that accumulate until they require accounting. It is a tidy apparatus. It does not need drama. It needs entries. You see the ledger's influence in the way people move about the yard. New arrivals enter with a slip of paper or a referral. They are assigned a number and a place, a slot in the rows that looks comfortable only at first glance. They are measured, fitted, and folded into the factory's geometry. Their faces are often young, their fingers slender and quick. They have not yet learned how to shape themselves to this pace. They carry the likeness of people who have not yet been required to file away parts of themselves. Older faces, in contrast, bear the ledger's slow effects. Lines around eyes where laughter once gathered now read like marginalia. Little notes added over time. Some have teeth shortened by constant use and chemical erosion. Others have hands calloused into shapes that are hard to soften again. These women, who have been present through many entries, carry themselves like volumes that have been opened and closed often. Their names sit somewhere in the middle of the book, neither new nor finished, a long list of repeated attendants. You watch how the ledger absorbs change. When a child arrives, someone marks a small check beside a column, and the schedule adjusts to include them. When a worker falls ill or is taken away, a brief notation appears, sick or removed, or simply a dash where a name once ran. There is no flourish to these entries. They are clean and efficient. A page is turned. A vacancy is recorded. Another girl steps in to fill the row. It is as methodical as filing paper into a cabinet. Sometimes you notice the blank spaces where someone's line once continued and then stops. The pause in the sequence registers like a missing stitch in a long seam. You realise, with a quiet, private calculation, that absence is also a form of record. The ledger holds the yes and the no with equal patience. It does not judge. It simply notes the end the same way it noted the beginning. When new girls arrive, they bring with them a small bundle of possessions, cloth, a scrap of soap, sometimes a letter folded thin. They stand for a moment at the gate and then are guided to a bench where someone older will show them which motions to repeat and which small rules to observe. Instructions are economical: how to dip, how to dry, how to keep count. There is no attempt at consolation. Comfort is not catalogued in the ledger, and so it is rarely offered in the factory. You sometimes watch those first days with a strange, detached interest. The new girls have an initial posture of attention, their eyes wide in the way of people unfamiliar with inventory as a philosophy. They ask few questions aloud because the environment teaches silence early. Yet you can see the questions in their hands, how they hold a stick uncertainly at first, how they glance at others for confirmation, how they copy small details with a patience that will soon become habit. In the ledger, their names receive columns and codes. In practice, they receive repetition. Departures happen in ways that are never ostentatious. A girl's absence might begin with a few missed days recorded on a slate, scribbled with ill. Later, a note appears, removed, family. Another entry may read, doctor's order or dismissed, efficiency. Each phrase is clinical, as if the book were performing triage in ink. The ledger's language becomes the room's language. It shapes how people explain loss to one another. Sometimes the ledger records a death in a compact, merciless notation. Initials, a date, perhaps a short word. The entry is often followed by a small silence among those who knew her bench. People will not speak at length. They fold the news into their actions, tightening their shawls, pressing hands to lips, adjusting sleeves more carefully than before. The community performs its mourning through economy. Gestures become the only allowable expressions. The ledger takes the final accounting, while those left continue to wield their hands. In the evenings, you imagine the ledger open, each page a field of lined ink. You picture the names like threads in a tapestry that is slowly being cut as edges fray. Among the rows you see patterns, girls who disappear early in life, their entries ending under shorthand that never explains why, those who persist for years, their names tacked to long sequences of dates that document endurance more than story. The ledger does not tell you the reasons. It offers cause only when it is necessary, and otherwise prefers the simplicity of recorded fact. A small number of entries concern the clinic that visits periodically. A clerk writes down symptoms and treatment in clinical script. Occasionally, The ledger includes a cross-reference to a medical note. Sometimes it simply notes a period of absence followed by returned. You sense that the ledger is an apparatus for controlling uncertainty. It reduces living, illness, and departure to traceable variables. That reduction helps the foreman plan output and assign quotas. It helps the factory remain efficient in the face of attrition. On certain days, a new girl will arrive with a face so young it seems incongruent with the ledger's seriousness. You remember one such child, barely in her teens, who arrived with her hair still smelling of home. She was placed beside you for a week. You showed her how to steady her wrist, how to count silently with her fingers, how to fold a cloth over the bins. After 10 days, she was absent. The ledger entry read, "Gone home." A small held breath passes through the benches when you think of her. The memory is brief, because the ledger moves quickly and the present demands attention. There are practicalities recorded that shape expectation. A note about incentive pay appears once in a while. Another lists a schedule for inspection. The ledger also documents small kindnesses, rare allowances for rest, brief shifts swapped between friends, though these are written with the same impartial hand as all else. Even generosity, when it is made official, becomes a line item. You sometimes consider the ledger's logic in terms of your own margin. Each day, you add a line to your private account. Aches, small luminescences at the gums, the way sleep is threaded with minor coughs. You fold these facts inward because the ledger will not register them unless they cross a threshold into recorded absence. Illness that causes only a short pause in attendance is unlikely to be annotated as anything more than an inconvenience. This thought makes you careful of meals, of the angles of your hands, of the ways you expose your mouth to the world. Despite its clinical nature, the ledger can inspire small acts of resistance. Once, a group of women quietly organised to swap shifts so a mother could visit a dying child. The foreman noted the swap without comment. The ledger received the amended entries and life continued. The book accommodated compassion in its own way, absorbing alterations like corrections to an account. It did not applaud them, but it allowed them to be recorded and thereby rendered official. When you leave at the end of the day, the ledger rests like a promise and a threat. It promises that each day will be accounted for, and it threatens that anonymity will be precise and total. The iron gates will open and close, names will slide into the book, faces will become marks on a page. You fold the small paycheck into your pocket and step into the fog, aware of the ledger's patient jurisdiction over your hours. You carry the knowledge that if you vanish from the record one day, your absence will be neat and succinct. A small precise line in a book that never hesitates to note an end. When the last tasks of the day dissolve into the low murmur of closing routines, you step out into an evening that feels neither fully night nor truly day. The air holds its own fatigue, a heaviness settled over the streets, like a blanket drawn too tightly and left unchanged for years. Lamps flicker to life along the narrow roads, their flames trembling behind glass that has gone cloudy with soot. You walk into this half-light with a pace that does not seek to rush or linger, a gait shaped by hours of controlled motion. The city outside the gate feels subdued, its edges softened by gathering fog. Footsteps of others scatter faintly against stone, quiet constellations of sound that appear and vanish without warning. Carts creak in distant alleys, and somewhere a vendor pulls down shutters with slow, tired movements. The world performs its ending rituals in a language of small noises, each one muted by routine. Your breath leaves your mouth in thin trails, pale threads that unravel quickly in the cold. Every exhalation carries the faint metallic taste that has come to live on your tongue, a reminder of the environment you worked in, a scent that no amount of rinsing can fully banish. The taste lingers while you walk. It settles along your gums with the soft insistence of an unwelcome guest. Shadows from the lamps fall across your face, stretching and contracting as you pass beneath them. They illuminate parts of you unevenly, cheekbones briefly sharpened, eyes dimmed to shallow reflections, the curve of your mouth outlined like a faint line drawn on parchment. The lamps seem almost reluctant, as though their weak flames prefer not to reveal too much of what moves beneath them. You move through streets that once might have held variety in their forms, but now register only as passages. Corridors of brick, stone and thin slivers of sky overhead. Your body responds more readily to the idea of direction than the memory of place. You know the route because you take it every evening, and yet it feels new each time, reshaped by the shifting palette of dusk. It is along one such street, narrow, crowded by leaning buildings, that you catch sight of your reflection. A shop window, its display emptied for the night, holds a faint, wavering view of the world outside. The glass is speckled with grime and warped from time, giving everything reflected in it a slightly distorted shape. You do not stop, but your eyes catch the movement of your own figure. Something in the angle of the light pulls you closer, just enough to make you examine the image. Your skin appears pale, drained of colour by the day's labour and the lamp's diffused glow. But the real shock comes from the faint brightness that traces the underside of your jaw, a soft, ghostly sheen that pulses almost imperceptibly. It is not a light produced by the lamp behind you. The glow seems to come from beneath the surface, from the bone and flesh that have absorbed the substance of your work. It flickers for a moment, responding to the shift in ambient light, and you recognize it instantly as the quiet signature of the phosphorus. You lean slightly closer without meaning to. The sheen follows you, a thin luminescence outlining the curve of your lower face. In the half shadow, it looks like a hesitant glow, a mark that refuses to call attention to itself, but nonetheless persists. It feels like an annotation written not by your hand, but by the work that has seeped into you, the body's private record of the days you've given, the breaths you've taken in rooms that feed on repetition. You close your mouth quickly, instinctively, as though hiding the glow might undo it. There is an immediate sting in your jaw when your teeth meet, a small throb that radiates upward. You turn your face slightly away from the window, unwilling to give the reflection another moment of scrutiny. You tell yourself it is only the angle of the lamp, the fatigue in your eyes, the residue of a long day. But somewhere, the thought presses quietly. The phosphorus keeps better account of your hours than the ledger ever will. As you walk again, you feel the glow even without looking. It is a sensation that does not physically exist, yet it haunts the edges of your awareness. A presence like a faint warmth that never reaches your skin but settles beneath it. You touch your jaw lightly with your fingertips. Your skin is cool, the bone firm, but the ache beneath confirms what the mirror hinted. You lower your hand, unwilling to explore the sensation further. The streets around you grow darker. Fog creeps along the ground in thin sheets, gathering in dips where cobblestones sink, and rising like suggestion in the air above. Carries with it the smell of the river, a damp, almost sour odour mixed with the faint sweetness of decay. You breathe it in through your mouth, then regret the reflex as the air brushes against your sore gums. You exhale slowly, careful not to bring your teeth together too sharply. In a small courtyard you pass, two boys chase each other around a broken fountain, their laughter brittle in the cold evening. Their joy feels fragile, like something that could shatter if held too tightly. You envy, if only for a brief moment, the weightlessness of their movements, the way they do not protect their jaws, the way nothing inside them glows without their permission. You continue on before the feeling can take root. A woman sits on her stoop with her shawl wrapped around her shoulders, her face turned toward the fog. She watches you pass without expression, her eyes following your figure, as though registering a familiar type rather than a specific person. You nod slightly, a gesture more habitual than polite. She returns the acknowledgement with a slow blink before turning her gaze back to the street. People who live near the factories often learn to recognize the signs carried by those who work inside. You travel further down a road where the lamps grow fewer. Your steps sound louder now, each one a dull tap against the damp stone. You feel the weight of the day pressing at your temples, behind your ears, along the ridge of your jaw. Fatigue gathers in the hollows of your eyes, making the world around you blur at the edges. Yet you keep walking, each step a continuation of the same practical motion that governed your hands at the bench. A small shop ahead leaves a lantern burning in its doorway. The glow spills across the path in a soft, hazy rectangle. You step through it, and the momentary brightness illuminates your face once more. You catch another glimpse of yourself in a piece of polished tin hanging near the entrance, a warped reflection, but clear enough to notice the faint shimmer beneath your jaw still lingers. It appears weaker here, more suggestion than light, but undeniable. You look away quickly and continue down the road. The glow trails behind your consciousness like a thin strand of thread, tugging at you gently. You imagine it lingering even after you sleep, pulsing softly in the dark, recording each beat of your heart with chemical precision. In your room, the air is cold and still. You remove your shawl and lean toward the small cracked mirror near your basin. Lighting a small candle, you let its flame settle before raising your chin. The glow appears again, faint, chillingly beautiful in its own wrong way. It emerges like a truth that wishes to remain modest, but cannot help its own clarity. You extinguish the candle with a steady breath. Darkness rushes back in, and for an instant you think you see a hint of the glow still present, hovering beneath your skin like an unfinished sentence. You close your eyes until the vision fades. When you lie down, you curl your hand beneath your cheek, as though shielding the bone from itself. Your jaw throbs in slow, controlled pulses. You feel each one as a reminder that the chemical has already made its way into the deepest parts of you. The city outside hums quietly, and the night settles like dust. You breathe through the ache, letting the darkness cover you without comfort or threat, only inevitability. The glow remains in the back of your mind, a faint echo against the darkness, marking time in a way no human overseer ever will. The door closes behind you with a softness that feels accidental, as though even the wood has grown weary of sound. The room you step into is narrow enough that your shoulders nearly brush the walls if you turn the wrong way. A single window, clouded with the grime of the neighbourhood, lets in the faintest sliver of evening light. It is not enough to illuminate the room fully, but it is enough to remind you how small it is. You set your shawl on the chair, a piece of furniture more symbolic than functional, and the fabric collapses into itself. The air in the room is cool, though the day's heat lingered on your skin until moments ago. This coolness isn't refreshing. It is the kind that settles into bones without announcing itself, the kind that finds the quiet places in your joints and waits there. You sit on the edge of the bed. The mattress dips slightly under your weight, springs old enough to groan if pressed too quickly. You lower yourself gently, conscious of the ache in your jaw, the pulsing discomfort that has followed you from street to stairwell, and now here. The bed smells faintly of soap and damp wool, clean in a way that feels more dutiful than comforting. Everything in this room serves a purpose, but none of those purposes are rest. Your eyes travel along the walls, searching for something to anchor to, a picture, a mark, a memory. But the walls remain silent. They are painted in the dull off-white that landlords choose when they want no part of themselves lingering in the rooms they rent. Cracks form faint maps across the plaster, tracing lines like territory claimed by time. You follow one such crack with your eyes, letting it lead you from ceiling to floor. It reaches the baseboard and disappears, as though it too is tired of being noticed. The basin near the window still holds the thin ribbon of water you use to wash your face. It reflects a dull shimmer from the candle you haven't yet lit. Your reflection in that water would be nothing more than a blur, features softened into ambiguity. You avoid it, wary of seeing the faint glow that has begun to haunt you in unexpected surfaces. You untie your boots slowly, easing them off with deliberate care. The warmth inside them escapes in a small muted exhalation. Your feet touch the wooden floor, which is cold but steady, bearing your weight without comment. The boards creak softly as you stand, their voices familiar now. You move to the window and lift the thin curtain. Outside, the fog hangs low, like an unrolled scroll of grey parchment. Lamps flicker in the distance, their light distorted by the moisture in the air. London feels far away and too close all at once. You let the curtain fall and return to the bed. You lie down, your body following the same practiced pattern it follows every night. Not because you crave sleep, but because there is nowhere else for you to be. The mattress receives you without giving comfort. It sinks where you sink, its shape moulded by the weight of your days. Your hands rest on your stomach, fingers slightly curled inward, as though still remembering the repetitive motions of work. There is a stillness in this room that feels less like peace and more like pause, a temporary halt in a long procession. You feel as though your life has been placed into storage here, tucked into a drawer that will be opened again only when required. The space is too small to collect dreams in, too narrow to hold the soft shapes of hope. Even your breath sounds contained, pressed into the air in shallow, careful increments. You stare at the ceiling. Its cracked patterns resemble ledgers, the same careful divisions, the same insistence on order. You imagine your thoughts slipping between those cracks, disappearing into a place where nothing is lost, but nothing is recovered either. The room carries the quiet inevitability of a warehouse, a place where things are kept, catalogued, and seldom revisited. Your jaw throbs again, a slow, rhythmic pulse that comes from a place deeper than the bone. You press your fingertips lightly against it, feeling the warmth that has settled beneath the skin. You close your eyes, and for a moment you imagine what it might be like to exist without this ache, what it might be like to breathe without counting the seconds between tenderness and pain. The thought passes quickly. You open your eyes, the quiet grows heavier. You hear the faint sounds from the street below. A cart rolling, a dog barking, the muffled laughter of someone whose life does not intersect with yours. Their voices drift upward, softened by distance, like echoes from another world. You lie still and listen, until the sounds fade again into the mist. You reach for the blanket and pull it over yourself. It is thin and worn, its edges frayed. The fabric scratches gently against your skin. You settle beneath it, finding a position that puts the least strain on your jaw. You turn your head slightly, allowing the pillow to cradle one side of your face. The pillow is flat, filled with material that has long lost its resilience, but it holds your shape like a quiet witness to your nights. Sleep does not come quickly. It rarely does. Instead, you drift in the narrow space between waking and dreaming, a place where thoughts move slowly, like objects underwater. You imagine memories floating around you, moments of childhood, glimpses of places you once loved, fragments of faces that no longer matter. These images linger, only for seconds before dissolving, leaving you suspended in the dull churn of your own breathing. You think about the factory, its sound, its air, its rulers, not with resentment, but with a detached familiarity, as though the place has imprinted itself onto the inside of your eyelids. You see the glow of the vats, the steady lines of benches, the rows of sticks that become matches in silent succession. You remember the smell of the paste, the weight of the tray in your hands, the presence of supervisors, whose language is numbers rather than care. These impressions drift through your mind like ledgers left open, unbalanced, waiting for completion. You shift slightly, and the bed creaks beneath you. The noise is small, but in the stillness, it reverberates. For a moment, you imagine the room responding, adjusting itself around your body, the way the bench adjusted to you earlier. Everything in your life seems built to hold you just long enough to return you to where you came from. You exhale slowly. The dimness in the room deepens as the candle wick burns lower. A faint draft slips through the gap beneath the window, brushing across your face. It brings with it the scent of wet stone and distant smoke. You breathe it in, letting the coolness settle inside your chest. Your jaw sends another slow pulse through your nerves, a quiet reminder that the day has left its mark. You close your mouth gently, cautious of the pressure, and let your eyes slip shut. There is no dream waiting, only the soft, monotonous hum of exhaustion. Eventually, your breathing steadies. The room does not comfort you, it merely holds you, like a box built to store what the world has worn down. You sink into the mattress, your body settling into the shape it has learned to occupy. The walls remain silent, the night settles, and your small, narrow room keeps its quiet vigil, a place too tight for dreams, yet large enough to contain another day's fatigue. You drift into sleep the way one drifts into a shallow pool, slowly, cautiously, uncertain whether the water will welcome or repel. The room around you fades only in increments, its narrowness lingering in your awareness even as your eyes close. The air has grown still, settling into corners like dust that refuses to leave. You turn on your side, your cheek sinking into the flat pillow, and the first thread of sleep unwinds itself from your exhaustion. But the rest you find is not continuous. It arrives in segments, brief and fragile, easily disturbed by the smallest intrusion. Your breath catches once, twice, and you half wake, your throat coated with the faint metallic residue that has followed you from the factory. You swallow, a slow and deliberate movement, and the ache in your jaw pulses in response. You allow your eyes to close again, but the depth of sleep remains shallow, allowing only a portion of your mind to drift. The night arranges itself into compartments. A few minutes of hazy forgetting, a cough, a gasp of air pulled too sharply, then another stretch of muted sleep. Your body moves without asking, shifting your weight, adjusting the angle of your neck, curling your fingers close to your chest. These movements feel procedural, the same way you work during the day, actions performed because they must be, not because comfort calls for them. The blanket slides slightly when you turn. You pull it up again, careful not to jar your jaw. The pressure inside it feels like a quiet metronome, a rhythm that does not change, whether you are upright or lying down. You breathe through your nose, shallow and patient, letting each inhalation settle in your chest. A faint burning sensation gathers behind your teeth, not painful enough to demand attention, but persistent enough to remind you that rest is only an interlude. Somewhere outside, a carriage wheel creaks over the cobblestone, and the sound threads itself into your light sleep. You flinch awake for a moment, the noise travelling into the room with surprising clarity. You exhale slowly and sink back down. The city continues its quiet routines, even at this hour. People move, carts roll, lamps flicker. But in your room, the world is limited to breath and pulse. You turn onto your back, staring up at the faint outline of the cracked ceiling. In the dimness, the cracks look like lines of text, written in a language only the tired can read. You imagine each one as a small directive, an instruction for how to lie still, how to breathe quietly, how to occupy the room with minimal disturbance. Even in rest, your mind organizes itself into these small obligations. A cough rises unbidden. You clamp your lips together, attempting to soften it, but the sound bursts out anyway, weak but jarring. The ache in your jaw intensifies as the cough vibrates through bone. You press your hand to your cheek until the wave recedes. The air tastes sharper now, the metallic tang coating your throat more heavily. You swallow again, the movement slow enough to avoid a spike of pain. Your breaths settle back into their administrative pattern, Inhale, brief pause, exhale. The cycle repeats as though governed by an unseen supervisor. You notice how each breath aligns with a faint sensation in your ribs, like ticking, your body keeping time with itself, refusing to deviate from the script written by fatigue and habit. Another fragment of sleep arrives, thin as tissue paper. In this sliver of unconsciousness, your mind conjures small imageless impressions. The warmth of a lamp, the clatter of machinery, the smell of paste rising from a heated vat. They hover like shadows without form, then disperse when your body stirs. Even dreams seem reluctant to settle here. Your fingers twitch slightly, curling and uncurling as though still holding a stick to be dipped. The muscle memory persists, even in exhaustion. Your hands seem unwilling to release the day's motions, clinging to them as though letting go would bring some greater imbalance. You let them twitch until they still again, guided by the calming pull of partial sleep. You adjust your position once more, folding your knees slightly toward your chest. The movement draws a quiet groan from the old mattress. The sound blends into the night, registering only as another small disturbance. Your breathing falters for a moment and then resumes, the pace unchanged. The room feels colder now. You reach down to tug the blanket higher, covering your shoulder, but the moment your hand touches the fabric, you feel the faint tremor in your fingers, a reminder of the long hours spent repeating the same motions. You rest your hand over your heart for a moment, feeling its steady beat beneath your palm. The rhythm is slower than during the day, but still carries that subtle administrative quality, each beat measured and functional. Sleep comes again, but only briefly. A burning sensation creeps along your gums, heating the area beneath your jaw. You wake with a soft gasp, the glow still invisible in the dark, but the warmth unmistakable. You press your face deeper into the pillow, hoping to mute the discomfort. The taste of metal creeps back into your mouth. You swallow. The sensation retreats but leaves behind a faint warning. Your thoughts scatter into loose fragments. A girl's face across the bench, the supervisor's slate, the ledger with its narrow handwriting. These fragments flicker in and out, unconnected, like files opened and closed at random. You try to push them aside, but the mind insists on reviewing the day one small piece at a time. It catalogues sensations, assigns them places, organises them into a pattern only it understands. Another cough breaks the fragile quiet. This one is softer, but it catches at the back of your throat, stirring the metallic taste until it spreads along your tongue. You breathe in sharply through your nose, then exhale slowly, waiting for the burn to diminish. Your eyes remain open this time, the ceiling a pale blur above you. You turn onto your side again. The blanket rustles softly. You draw your knees closer, curling into a shape that feels protective, as if shrinking your body will shrink the sensations that pull you back to waking. Your breathing becomes shallow once more, regulated by the caution you've learned over many nights. Minutes pass in an indistinct stream. Your eyelids droop but do not fully close, hovering between states. Your thoughts drift again, but never far enough to allow dreaming. They hover at the threshold, held back by the persistent awareness of your own breath. Slow, measured, and slightly strained. You shift your arm beneath your pillow. The movement sends a faint jolt through your jaw, a reminder that rest does not erase the day's residue. You breathe through the discomfort until it levels out, becoming another steady throb in the background. The night stretches on in segments, moments of near sleep, moments of shallow waking. Each time you begin to sink deeper, your body reasserts itself with a cough or a swallow, or the dull pulse beneath your gums. Rest becomes a sequence of small pauses rather than a continuous descent. You find yourself caught between wanting to fight the interruptions and accepting them as part of the night's function. Outside, a distant bell rings, perhaps from a church tower, perhaps from somewhere farther. The sound drifts through the window in a softened tone, marking time in a way the city rarely does at night. It reminds you that the world beyond your room continues, indifferent to your rest or lack of it. You close your eyes again. Your breath resumes its soft, procedural pattern. You feel the faint warmth beneath your jaw. You taste metal. Your limbs grow heavier. And finally, after another stretch of drifting, sleep manages to take you for a longer moment, still fragile, still shallow, but enough to quiet your mind. In that brief, proper sleep, the room feels almost gentle. The ache recedes to a thin outline, and your breaths lengthen, your fingers unclench. The night holds you without turbulence, as though acknowledging that even bodies shaped by labour require moments of reprieve. But the reprieve is temporary. A rustle of blankets, a shift in your jaw, a cough rising like an unbidden reminder, and the cycle begins again. You wake softly, breathing measured, throat coated with that familiar metallic taste, eyes adjusting to the dimness. The night continues in its quiet procession. You count breaths the way others count coins. 1, 2, 3, each one part of an internal ledger you cannot help but maintain. Your body follows its script, performing its tasks without deviation, even in sleep. And as dawn begins to gather in the faintest grey along the window, you lie there in that small room, breathing in the administrative rhythm your life has become, waiting for the next day to call you back into its measured routines. Morning arrives with a dull greyness that slides quietly beneath your window pane, stirring you from the fragmented sleep that left you more aware than rested. The room holds a chilled stillness, like a ledger waiting for its first mark of the day. You dress in slow, practiced motions, smoothing the wrinkles from your skirt with mechanical precision. Your jaw aches faintly, a muted echo of the night's interruptions, but the ache feels as familiar as the floor beneath your feet. Today, you do not walk toward the factory. The bell will ring without you. Another pair of hands will lift the sticks, dip them, set them aside. The ledger will mark your absence with a simple symbol, one that carries neither favour nor reprimand. A rare day to yourself, though even that phrase feels misleading. The day does not belong to you. It merely avoids claiming you for work. You step outside into a London that has already begun its morning shuffle. The fog folds itself low along the streets, thinning in some places, thickening in others, like a living creature adjusting to the motion of people passing through it. Your boots tap softly as you join the flow, a quiet body among many, moving without direction. The air carries the scent of coal smoke and damp stone, a mixture so ingrained in the city that it seems to breathe it out naturally. Shops open with slow, deliberate motions. A butcher sweeps his doorstep. A newsboy arranges papers with bold headlines that do not concern you. Women in shawls hurry to market stalls, exchanging coins and brief nods. The city is awake, but not attentive. You walk among these people without drawing notice. Your presence neither observed nor ignored, simply absorbed into the steady pulse of the street. You move past a bakery where the smell of warm bread slips through an open door, brushing against your senses like a memory you do not entirely recognize. You pause near the entrance, watching customers step inside, their faces softened by anticipation. You imagine buying a loaf yourself, something warm, soft, untouched by the taste of machinery. But you continue walking. Bread baked here costs more than you can justify, and the hunger you carry is practical, not indulgent. A group of children runs past you, their laughter a sharp break in the morning's muted tone. One brushes your skirt, glancing back only briefly, before forgetting you entirely. Their world is bright with motion, unconcerned with the slow, persistent grind of adulthood. You feel their energy pass you by like a gust of wind that does not bother to linger. You drift into a busier street where vendors call to passers-by, waving wares with practiced enthusiasm. Fruits stacked in neat pyramids, bolts of fabric in faded patterns, jars of preserves lined in rows, all displayed with a kind of hopeful stubbornness. The crowd shifts around you, moving in patterns that flow and collide like tides shaped by invisible forces. Your steps fit easily into the rhythm. You are used to walking in formation, responding to the movements of others without drawing notice. People glance at you only with the vacant familiarity reserved for the countless girls whose lives run parallel to theirs. You recognize the look, eyes that pass over you as though reading a number instead of a name. Your existence in this crowd feels oddly confirmed by the lack of attention. You have become a fixture of the city's design, part of its machinery, a silent gear that keeps the rhythm steady. You find yourself stopping near the river, its waters sluggish beneath the morning fog. The Thames has a muted grey-green colour, a mixture of industry and tide. Barges drift slowly, pushed along by workers with long poles. Their movements are steady, functional, mirroring the routines you know so well. You stand at the railing, gripping the cold iron, and watch the water ripple in dull patterns. Across the river, chimneys exhale plumes of smoke that rise and curl into the thickening sky. You know that within those factories, girls like you are working through their morning shift, hands busy, mouths closed, eyes half-focused. The city does not recognize the weight of those hours. It only registers the results. Goods produced, quotas met, ledgers filled, lives spent to keep the structure intact. A man walks past you, tipping his hat to a woman beside you, but not to you. You realize he looked directly at you without seeing you. It is a familiar sensation, one that has settled into your bones. The city pretends not to know your name, because names require recognition, and recognition requires value, not measured in bundles or trays. You continue along the riverbank, letting the cool air sting your cheeks. A breeze pushes strands of hair across your face. You catch a faint glimpse of your reflection in a puddle, distorted, wavering. The pale curve of your jaw seems brighter in the water's fractured surface, a faint light that vanishes when the ripples settle. You pull your shawl closer, not out of cold, but out of a quiet desire to cover the evidence your body carries. Turning into a quieter street, you pass houses that stand shoulder to shoulder, their windows grimy with soot. Laundry hangs limply between buildings, damp from the morning fog. Women kneel near doorsteps, scrubbing floors or shaking out rugs, their faces set in firm lines. You walk by them unacknowledged, each person consumed with their own routines. Their silence echoes yours. At a small market square, you stop near a stall selling second-hand clothes. The garments hang in uneven lines, their colours faded by years of wear and washing. A coat catches your eye, sturdy fabric, deep brown, it seems still intact. You hold it for a moment, rubbing your fingers over the coarse wool. It feels warmer than anything you own, but the price marked on it exceeds the small portion of coins sitting in your pocket. You return it gently to its hook, accepting without bitterness that some comforts remain out of reach. The vendor barely glances at you. She calls instead to a woman browsing beside you, offering prices and descriptions. When her eyes skim over you, they move on instantly, as though you had no practical use to her business. You leave the market without regret, your pace steady, your thoughts returning to the quiet ache in your jaw. You wander to a narrow lane where street lamps lean slightly, their iron posts crooked with age. The cobblestones here are uneven, worn by countless feet. A cat darts across your path, disappearing beneath a wooden cart. The small movement makes you pause. You listen to the faint rustle of the cat settling into its hiding place, a small life navigating the city's margins, just as you do. You walk until your legs grow heavy, your feet ache inside your boots. The city continues around you, cabs rattling over stone, vendors shouting prices, women haggling over apples, men shouting greetings across streets. Yet nothing pauses for your presence. You might walk through London for hours without anyone knowing you were there. You sit on a bench near a row of shuttered shops. The bench is cold, its wood rough beneath your palms. You watch people drift past, their conversations low and indistinct. You observe how they gesture, how they breathe, how their faces shift. With small private thoughts, you notice how none of them look toward you long enough to form recognition. You sit among them like a placeholder, present but easily replaced. Your jaw throbs gently as you rest your head against the bench's back. The glow that startled you last night flickers in your memory. You touch your chin lightly. The skin feels cool, but you know what lies beneath, what the city cannot see, what it would not care to see, even if it could. A girl glowing faintly at the seams does not disrupt the city's function. She simply fits into the shape it expects. As you rise to walk again, the sky begins to darken. The lamps flicker to life, one by one, their weak flames trembling in the wind. People hurry home, their silhouettes stretching long on the cobbles. You slip into the flow easily, your footsteps aligning with theirs. You do not feel part of the crowd, but you move within it, matching its pace without being absorbed by its warmth. London holds you the way. It holds soot on its windows and fog in its alleys, neither rejecting nor embracing, simply allowing you to exist within its machinery. Your presence is part of a system that runs smoothly when its parts avoid announcing themselves. By the time you reach your street, the city has settled into its evening rhythm. Lamps glow faintly, doors close, windows dim. You climb the stairs to your narrow room and step inside, greeted by the same small silence that greeted you in the morning. And as you settle onto the bed, your mind carries the muted truth of the day, that you walked through London without being seen. Your life recorded, not in memory, but in the faint ache beneath your jaw. A private ledger the city will never read, even as it uses you to keep its wheels turning. Morning approaches not as a shift in light, but as a quiet pressure against the edges of your sleep, nudging you back into consciousness. Your eyes open before the room has fully taken shape, its dim outlines emerging slowly through the haze of another incomplete night. The air carries the same cool stillness that greeted you yesterday and the day before, an unaltered atmosphere that seems to repeat itself without intention. You sit up, feeling the slight protest in your limbs, the accumulated stiffness of labour that never quite leaves. The thin blanket falls from your shoulders, and the cold air wraps itself around you in a familiar, indifferent gesture. Nothing in the room signals that time has passed. The basin still holds its faint ring of last night's water. The chair still leans slightly to one side. The cracks in the ceiling are unchanged, their quiet lines mapped like a routine that doesn't require thought. You move through the motions of dressing with the efficiency of someone who has done it too many times for it to be a decision. Your fingers tie your apron without hesitation, the knot forming with the same practiced tension each day. When you stand, you feel the muted pulse beneath your jaw, a dull, predictable ache that reminds you, without urgency, that the night offered only partial reprieve. The sensation has become part of your internal rhythm, a soft metronome guiding your morning with its steady insistence. You take a moment at the small mirror near the basin. The reflection is blurred by age and dust, softening your features into shapes that lack sharpness. You tilt your head slightly, searching for anything unusual, but the dim light offers no revelations. Your skin appears pale, your eyes tired, your jaw holding its quiet heat. You touch your cheek lightly, feeling the faint throb beneath your fingertips. It holds no surprise, only confirmation. Outside, the corridor smells faintly of coal smoke drifting from distant chimneys. You descend the narrow stairs, careful of the boards that creak, and step into the muted morning. Fog cloaks the street in a gauzy shroud, softening the lines of buildings and making the lamps appear like tired sentries. The world feels suspended, as though it has not yet committed to the day. Your boots find their path without instruction. The route is etched into your movements, a sequence of turns and steps you no longer consciously register. You pass the same row of houses, their windows shuttered against the cold. A cat winds its way along a low wall, ignoring you as it leaps down and disappears beneath a stoop. A woman sweeps her doorstep with slow, rhythmic strokes, her expression unreadable in the half-light. The fog thickens as you move deeper into the streets, muffling the sounds of distant activity. Carts roll somewhere ahead, their wheels muted by damp stone. A bakery opens its shutters, letting out a breath of warm air that carries the faint scent of bread. You inhale briefly, the smell barely penetrating the metallic taste that lingers on your tongue. Children hurry along the pavement, carrying lunches wrapped in cloth, headed to places where lessons and structure await them. They move past you without pausing, without offering a glance. Their steps are light, unburdened by the weight that settles in your bones. You watch them vanish into the fog, swallowed by the city's morning rhythm. Your hands slide into the pockets of your shawl as you continue. The street widens near the river, and you feel a chill rising from the water, its damp breath brushing against your skin. Barges float silently in the fog, their outlines ghost-like. Workers move aboard them with practiced steadiness, their figures blurring into the muted landscape. Even the river seems to exist in a state of routine, its tides predictable, its surface reflecting the dull grey of the sky. The path turns, and the factory begins to emerge. Not suddenly, but gradually, as though the fog hesitates to reveal it. The building rises with the same unremarkable solidity it displays every morning. The tall windows reflect nothing, their panes dull and tired. Smoke escapes from a vent near the roof, dissolving into the thick air without leaving a trace. Your pace does not slow as you approach the gate. The iron bars stand as they always do, cold, impassive, a structure that acknowledges presence only through passage. You push the gate open, its hinges offering their familiar groan. The sound blends into the morning, absorbs seamlessly into the day's unfolding. Inside the yard, the foreman stands beside his desk, ledger open. His pencil moves in small, precise strokes, marking entries with the efficiency of someone who has turned human activity into arithmetic. When he glances up, it is not your face he checks, but your presence. A nod from him confirms that the record has been updated. You respond with a slight tilt of your head, the exchange complete without words. Workers gather in the yard, each one moving with the same muted intention, preparing themselves for another cycle of labour. Their expressions are reserved, their movements measured. Some adjust their shawls, others tie their aprons. No one speaks loudly. The morning holds a kind of ceremonial quiet, as though acknowledging the hours that lie ahead, while offering no comfort for them. A bell rings, its metallic tone cutting through the fog with practiced authority. You fall into step with the others, your feet finding the familiar rhythm of the factory floor. The corridor leading to the main hall smells faintly of warm paste and vague chemical residue. The boards beneath you creak in the same places they always do, unchanged by the countless feet that cross them each day. You enter the hall, and the atmosphere folds around you with its usual precision. Machines clatter softly to life, workers take their positions without needing instruction. The air hums with the steady rhythm of industry, and you feel your body align with it, as though guided by an unseen conductor. Your station waits, the bench, the tray, the slender sticks arranged in their orderly rows. Everything is positioned as though expecting you. You tie your sleeves back, settle onto your stool, and lift the first stick of the day. The paste in the vat glistens faintly under the lamplight, thicker in the morning cool. You dip the stick, lift it, tilt it. The motion is smooth, practiced, necessary. The morning advances without announcement. The fog beyond the windows shifts only slightly, its movements subtle and muted. Inside, the room's rhythm deepens, becoming a kind of dull heartbeat that governs the flow of time. You work quietly, your hands achieving familiarity. within minutes, your breath settling into the steady cadence of the hall. As the first hour passes, your jaw throbs again, soft, persistent, almost reassuring in its predictability. You breathe through the sensation, allowing it to join the other forces that shape your day. Fatigue, repetition, expectation, all of these weave together into a routine that sustains itself without needing reflection. The door at the far end of the hall creaks open briefly, letting in a fresh thread of fog. A new girl steps inside, her eyes wide and uncertain. She hesitates for only a moment before being guided to a bench. Her steps are careful, her shoulders tense. You watch her without staring, seeing in her posture the same shape your own once held. There is a steadiness to the way the factory absorbs her. Another addition to the rows, another name to be entered in the ledger. Her presence changes nothing, yet she fills a space that required filling. The routine adjusts around her effortlessly, as if she had always been there. Your day continues, each movement part of a long sentence, written in motions rather than words. No punctuation marks interrupt the flow, no moments set aside for reflection, no shifts in tempo. Just the steady unfolding of hours that resemble one another so closely they could be printed in a sequence without dates. When you glance toward the windows again, the fog has lifted slightly, allowing a faint light to seep into the room. It is not brightness, it is simply a paler shade of grey. You feel no particular response to it. Morning carries on with the same restrained certainty as always. You keep working, the routine holding you in place like a binding force. The day stretches ahead, indistinguishable from the one before it, and likely from the one after. You move forward because the next motion calls for your hand, and when the next comes, you follow that one too. It continues, calm and procedural, a life unfolding one measured gesture at a time. And as you dip another match into the waiting vat, the story does not end. It simply moves forward, without punctuation, into another morning that looks exactly like the last. And that brings us to the end of tonight's story. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment with another forgotten corner of history you'd like explored next. If you'd like early access to more of these quiet descents into forgotten history, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, there's a link to the Patreon in the description. If you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps more people find their way to these stories. And special thanks to the supporters who make this show possible, including our chroniclers, Andrew S., Rich Davis, and Leslie Schofield. Sleep well.